Hello, welcome to Holy Nation. We are so excited to be here with you, the RESTREPOs. We are still kicking off this segment in this month on stress, alleviating stress out of our lives. It's anti-stress month for the month of April. And last week we started by talking about spiritual. How spiritually we can alleviate stress. And spiritually, we talked about the fact that stress is the perception of the things that we are facing, the perception of threat, of misfortune, of lack, of you feeling like you don't have what you need or you're not capable of doing what you need to do. That triggers stress. And we talked about the fact that perception is a spiritual faculty. And so if we are to address stress, we have to address our perception, how we see and look at things, right? And so this week we want to continue that topic. We want to continue to understand how can we really alleviate stress out of our life, at least minimize it to the smallest amount it possibly can be. And so this week we're going to talk about stress and our emotions. And so without further ado, we can jump in. If you have anything to say before we get started, please.
Well, I just want to say hello, Holy Nation, welcome. And we really want to help you to, first of all, assess where you are when it comes to your stress levels and your emotional state. But more importantly, we want to arm you or give you the tools necessary to really overcome a lot of what people are dealing with in our society now, which is pretty rampant, and really to understand that stress is something that really comes against us in a very detrimental way. Stress is a killer, and we want to see that your stress levels come into normal ranges. Honestly, everyone has stress. I mean, we all have varying levels of stress, but it's how we cope with it and how we deal with that stress. And so hopefully today's session will help you to really assess where you are and maybe give you some tools to really begin to understand how to alleviate some of that stress.
Yes, exactly. You know, when we talk about stress, I think so many times we think about the things that are happening as the stress.
Yes.
But it's not the things that are actually happening that's the stress. It's how we see it, how we think about it, that triggers a chemical response in the body that's usually negative, a production of chemicals or hormones that begin to produce in the body that can either be that most times, not either be, most times are, like you said, detrimental to our health.
Yes.
And so today I really wanted to strike in on how we can really catch stress at its onset.
Yes.
And one of the things that happens at the onset of stress, how you know that you are stressed, is how you feel. Your emotions is the first thing that gets triggered by stress. So something happens, right? Based on how I see it, how I perceive it, the next thing that's going to happen is how I feel about it. And so if we can begin to address it at the feeler part, right? When I start to feel these, the signs of depression, and when I start to feel anxiety or anger or irritability or restlessness, feelings of being overwhelmed, unmotivated, unfocused, trouble sleeping or sleeping too much, always feeling sleepy, racing thoughts, I can't seem to control my thoughts, they're all over the place, or constant worry, problems with your memory or your concentration or making bad decisions. All of these are emotional signs that you're stressed out.
Yes.
And so the key is really to begin to, to counteract those thoughts and those feelings right then and there. And not allow them to continue, not allow yourself to get sucked into that emotional place and allow that stress, that physiological reaction that's going on to continue for a prolonged time, because then you end up with it becoming physical ailment, right?
That's good.
And so we really want to really be able to do that. Your emotions reveal your thoughts and perceptions of what's happening in your life. So really what you're feeling is really telling you how you're thinking and how you're looking at things. And if you're feeling bad, then you're thinking about your situation wrong, right? Because you can't think bad and feel good. And you can't think good and feel bad. So your emotions really is like a warning. I always feel like it's like a warning to you, like, hey, look, listen up. How you're thinking, how you're seeing this thing is not in alignment with God's truth, is not in alignment with your good. And that's why you feel the way you feel. And so many of us are governed by how we feel. Wow. We let it dictate everything that we do. We let it dictate how we respond. We are so motivated by the things that we feel, not realizing what is motivating the feeling.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's so good that you really bring that out, because a lot of people aren't even consciously aware of how they deal with situations and circumstances from this place from this emotional place. And the thing about emotions, they can be fickle. We have to learn how to gain a level of control over these things so that they don't dictate where we go. Right. And it's interesting because I had something in my notes about emotions. That our emotions are always in motion. Do you get that? Emotions, they're always in motion. So our emotions move us.
Yes.
They move us to either, they move us in our feelings to either feeling, like you said, good or feeling bad. And generally, if you don't have the proper perspective and you have that pessimistic outlook on things, then your emotions can tend to shift you towards the negative.
Yes.
And once you're shifted towards the negative, then these chemical reactions start to go on, and then we begin to see this imbalance. Where the emotions now have pushed us from a place of peace and well-being to now stress, anxiety, frustration sets in, and we don't know how to deal with it. So when traumatic situations that we go through are not dealt with at the source, it can leave behind a toxic mixture of unprocessed emotional baggage. Unprocessed emotional baggage, excuse me. These feelings don't sit silently. Suppressed feelings or emotions will eventually work their way to the surface, coming out in unhealthy ways. So if there's some issues that you went through in your past that you never dealt with, that you never actually took the time to heal from, when certain things happen, they begin to trigger those same emotional feelings. Even though the situation can be completely different, they trigger those same emotional feelings, and then those chemicals start to flood in, and then we get these feelings of stress and anxiety. Depression even can set in. So it is vital for us to really understand how to kind of wrangle those things, those emotions, those unprocessed, undealt with emotions in. When we don't allow them to be brought into the open, those issues and those situations that traumatically impacted or affected us, when we don't allow them to be brought to the open and healed, they will express themselves as symptoms. And you read that list of symptoms. I don't know if you want to read those again. They so your emotions now begin to express themselves as symptoms. So you're no longer now looking at the fact that there's an emotional issue going on. You're now looking at the fact that your heart is racing, or you're sweating, or your blood pressure may rise, or these different things that now physiologically are starting to happen to you. You need to understand, beloved, that it all begins in the emotional status. I don't want to take too much of your time.
Your way of thinking is they're so connected. And I think a lot of times we're not aware of that.
Yes.
And your emotions as well carry energy, right? So a lot of times you're feeling a certain way.
That's good.
And you don't realize that that feeling, that emotion is exuding from you an energy, and that energy attracts. So if the energy is negative, it attracts negative. And if the energy is positive, it attracts positive. And that's why sometimes we wonder why you can go, you know, be around, even like us, a spouse, and you come into a room and your energy is off and you're in a negative place, or you've had a bad day at work and you've been processing that mentally all the way home from work in a negative way. You get home, your energy, your emotions are in a negative place, and immediately your spouse or your loved ones can feel that energy. And sometimes if you're in a space where the concept of what we're sharing here today of thinking about what you think and realizing how you feel is not something that's practiced, you can immediately be affected negatively by the negative energy, and then begin to think about that person negatively and what they're displaying. And now we've drawn negativity to us because your energy creates energy within the sphere that you're in that's either going to draw that same thing to you, unless that person is mature spiritually, honestly. You got to be able to be mature spiritually, which is why we're talking about this. Because when it comes to your emotions, no one, I repeat, no one is responsible for how you feel but you. And I think this is a big deal, because so many times we put our feelings on someone else. Well, I feel like this because you did this, or because you're like that, or because you said this, or because you didn't do something. But when you understand how your emotions are tied to your thoughts, then you have to take responsibility. That it's not about what someone else did, it's more so about what I think about what you did. And that's why one person can say the same thing to two different people, and one person responds negative, blows off the handle, loses control, and the other person can not be fazed by it at all. Why? Because the perception, because of how they saw what was said, right? And that dictated how they feel. And so when we understand that everything that I feel really is about how I think, even you know, you brought up past things that trigger this emotional place in us. And a lot of times that happens because of just what you said, they're unresolved. Why are they unresolved? Because the way we see them was not brought to a place of healing. It didn't bring us to a new perspective. When you deal with past emotional hurt and you get a new perspective, a better perspective on it, that causes you to heal, and then you're able to no longer respond negatively from that place. But as long as you always see it from a negative place, you've never dealt with it, you always seen it the way you see it. Anytime something similar to that experience comes, you're going to see it negatively and you're going to respond the same, right? And so it is so important for us to understand how powerful our emotions are, not only in just what we feel, but in really helping us to assess where we are.
That's great. Yes.
You know, if we could really, really take the time when we are feeling things to assess where we are, it really would help us to be able to move forward in a much better way. You know, our bodies are created to function in two ways: growth and protection, right? And so when we're in this place of negative emotion, when we're in this place where we're constantly looking at things from a negative standpoint, we begin to produce in our bodies chemicals, hormones, again, like we said earlier, and I don't want to go too deep into it because we're going to definitely touch on the physiological aspects of stress and what it's doing to the body as well. But we have to realize that staying in that place of stress emotionally is what creates that protection hormone, that stress hormone to build up. And an excess of that, an imbalance of that begins to really attack the heart in different different health issues begin to arise out of that. But it really also helps us to understand the strategy of the enemy. So this is the reason why the enemy wants us to stay in a mindset of fear, of impending doom all the time. Because when you're constantly afraid and when you're constantly thinking about something is going to happen negatively or I can't do something, you stay in this protection mode. That protection mode begins to break you down even to the cellular level. So it is really why God is always admonishing us in his word to what? Fear not. Because it's not just about the fear itself. It's about what your way of thinking chemically is producing in your body. Fear is an attack on you spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically.
Yes.
Right? Yes. And so that is where we have to understand why it's so important for us really not to fall into these emotional feelings, especially when it comes to fear. I think that's the biggest one, because so many of the other negative emotions come really from that root of fear.
Welcome to Holy Health and Fitness, where we help you to live whole, spirit, soul, and body.
We are the leading online health, fitness, and faith community that provides three-dimensional spirit, soul, and body information, support, and accountability.
Here you will have full access to daily meditations, transformational messages, mind-renewing tools and exercises, meal and workout plans, community encouragement and support, and a whole lot more.
Unlike other faith or fitness communities, we focus on the well-being of the whole person.
Our goal is to live whole
and to help you live whole.